Joining me right now is Kentucky Congressman, House Financial Services Committee member, and House Veteran Affairs Committee member Andy Barr. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks very much for being here. Walk us through your letter to John Kerry, and have you heard a response yet?
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Maria. No, we have not heard a response yet, but I think the major U.S. banks, the Wall Street banks, are learning a painful lesson that their full-throated embrace of environmental, social governance positions is not placating or appeasing the extreme far left in this country. And in fact, it's inviting the very political interference in their businesses that they shouldn't want. This is the worst of politicization of access and allocation of capital, and it's going to threaten jobs. It's going to threaten U.S. competitiveness, and bottom line is it's going to cede competitiveness to China.
Well, I want to ask you more about this because you are the ranking Republican on oversight on the Financial Services Committee. You're a member of both the China Task Force and the Foreign Affairs Committee, and you have a real knowledge into what's happening in terms of the China behavior as well as the business climate. What's going on in terms of these corporations coming out attacking things like Georgia and its voting law? Meanwhile, under the umbrella of ESG, they are able to tell the rest of us not to invest in sin stocks. Don't buy oil companies. Don't buy tobacco companies. They're sin stocks, and yet they're perfectly fine investing in and opening offices in communist China, where there is human rights abuses, intellectual property theft, bullying of its neighbors, and just all around bad behavior on the global stage.
Well, Maria, you've done a great job pointing out the hypocrisy of corporate America and big banks in the United States being perfectly fine investing in China. And in some cases, we see large U.S. asset managers and large systemically important banks in the United States financing companies with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Obviously, we know of the human rights violations, the genocide in the Xinjiang province against the Uyghurs, forced sterilization, the ripping up of an international treaty in Hong Kong, and the violation of the rights of the people of Hong Kong, and obviously the cover-up, the lies and the deception related to the origins of the pandemic. This is the human rights record of the Chinese Communist Party, and yet many of these woke Wall Street firms are fine investing in China, but when it comes to U.S. companies, they're perfectly willing to choke off financing to legally operating businesses that provide Americans affordable, reliable energy and give us a competitive edge. Meanwhile, China is the world's largest polluter. They are the problem with climate. And if on this Earth Day, if you really care about climate, then you would hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable. You know, their Belt and Road Initiative, Maria, is responsible for the planning of 300 new coal-fired power plants across the globe outside of mainland China, in places like Bangladesh and Turkey and Indonesia and the Philippines. And so and by the way, the technology that they're using is not U.S. technology. It's subcritical, low-efficiency coal-fired power. So look, at this summit, we need to be focusing not on politicizing access to capital in the United States and choking off financing to American companies. We need to be holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable for polluting this earth. That's the focus, and that's my message to John Kerry.
Yeah, this is such an important point, but what are the odds we're going to hold them to account? We haven't even asked them where the coronavirus originated from, Congressman.
Exactly.
I mean, give me a break. We were schooled in Alaska, not a word about the millions of people across the world that have died, the 500,000 that have died in the United States because of coronavirus, because they covered it up and they allowed it to escape its borders. So do you have any confidence that they're going to hold them to account on climate?
No, I don't. When our Secretary of State is lectured by a top Politburo official on U.S. soil and they don't get up and leave the room, it shows the weakness that this administration is showing towards the Chinese Communist Party. And what I'm concerned about is the overeagerness that John Kerry and Joe Biden are exhibiting to our adversary in Beijing. It leads me to believe that they're giving the Chinese communists leverage over the United States. It looks like we're willing to bring Xi Jinping Jinping to this climate conference and give up the store and not hold them accountable. We're giving away leverage in negotiations on trade, on human rights, on the military operations in the South China Sea. There are increasingly belligerent activities related to Taiwan. And so I'm very concerned that this administration has its priorities totally wrong, focused on implementing the Green New Deal through the back door of financial regulation, as opposed to bolstering U.S. competitiveness and standing up to the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing. This is a real problem.
Yeah. Well, why? I mean, are they conflicted? Why can't they stand up to the Communist Party? And by the way, they're all playing word games with us. They called the Green New Deal an infrastructure package. They call a massive spending package a COVID package, right? They call the climate situation a climate crisis, but they won't call the crisis at the border. That's a challenge. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. And the fact that more media is not standing up and calling this out is also shameful. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo joined House Republicans yesterday to unveil a new bill that will codify into law Trump-era sanctions on Iran. This is another outrageous issue coming from the Biden administration. Iran. The Maximum Pressure Act would require any new deal with Tehran to be ratified by the Senate. Congressman, you're a co-sponsor of this Maximum Pressure Act. What is the Biden administration doing wanting to get us back into the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, once again, showing weakness on the world stage and inviting aggression from the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, Iran. The maximum pressure campaign is exactly what we need. It worked under the Trump administration. Military spending by the mullahs in Tehran reduced by 25%. Many of the Iran-backed militias that destabilized the region, they were denied funding, and Iran's reserves of foreign currency dropped 95% because of the Trump administration's maximum pressure. We need to return to that. We don't need to re-enter a flawed Iran nuclear deal. That's why I have proposed to make sure that Senate ratification and treating this as a treaty should be required as a condition of rejoining any flawed agreement.
Yeah, and the rejoining is also jeopardizing potentially our peace in the Middle East with those Abraham Accords. Andy Barr, good to see you. We will keep spotlighting all of this. Thank you so much. We'll be right back.